Hey everyone, if you enjoy deep, emotional stories about family, betrayal, and hard-earned revenge, make sure to subscribe to the channel before the story begins. The Rhine was steel gray that winter, moving slow beneath the bridges of Cologne, as if even the river felt the weight of what was coming. From the glass walls of the boardroom on the 32nd floor, the city looked orderly and obedient. Church spires, tram lines, old stone stitched neatly to modern steel. I had helped pay for half of it in one way or another. $85 million. That was the valuation glowing on the screen behind me. Havelman Group. Logistics, property, energy infrastructure. 12 years earlier, it had been a struggling regional firm with aging warehouses and outdated contracts. Now it was a multinational acquisition target. I stood at the head of the table, remote in hand, finishing the presentation I'd rehearsed 100 times. And with the Rotterdam expansion finalized, I said, we project a 23% growth over the next fiscal year. Applause followed. Polite, controlled, German. Across the table, my father-in-law, Ernst Havelman, leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled, lips curved in that familiar satisfied smile. Silver hair, tailored suit, a man who had never missed a meal or a chance to let others feel small. Well done, Lucas, he said. Very impressive. I nodded, feeling the old reflexive gratitude rise before I crushed it. I hadn't needed his approval in years. But habits formed in unequal families die hard. Beside him sat my wife, Clara, or rather, the woman who had once been my wife. She wore a cream blazer, hair pinned back with careful elegance. She hadn't looked at me once during the meeting. Ernst cleared his throat. Now, before we break for lunch, I have a small announcement. Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. This company, he continued, is entering a new chapter, one that requires fresh alignment within the family. He turned toward me fully now, eyes bright, almost kind. Lucas, he said, smiling, your wife's new husband will take over operations. The room went silent. The words didn't land all at once. They came in pieces. Wife, new, husband. I looked at Clara. Slowly, she met my eyes. There was no shock there, only relief, as if something long delayed had finally been set down. Ernst went on, voice smooth as polished wood. You've done exceptional work, truly, but leadership must remain personal, you understand. I didn't, not yet. The meeting ended in a blur. Chairs scraped, papers gathered. No one met my gaze. In the elevator down, I watched my reflection distort in the mirrored walls, a man unraveling silently. Outside, sleet fell in thin, biting sheets. Cologne Cathedral loomed dark against the sky, eternal and indifferent. 12 years earlier, I had arrived in this city with 2 suitcases and a degree my parents had nearly bankrupted themselves to give me. My father, a dock worker from Gdansk, had ruined his backlifting containers owned by men like Ernst. My mother cleaned offices at night. When I married Clara, I thought I'd crossed an invisible border into safety. Instead, I had entered a system. Ernst had offered me a junior role to learn the business. I learned fast, faster than his own executives. I renegotiated contracts, digitized operations, cut dead weight. Profits rose. Ernst took credit. Clara smiled, proud but distant. We lost a child in our 3rd year of marriage, a boy, stillborn. Something in Clara hardened after that. She poured herself into charity galas and appearances. I buried myself in work. Ernst told me grief was weakness. You replace loss with productivity, he'd said. That's how families survive. Now I understood what he meant. The divorce papers had been signed months ago. Quietly, efficiently. I'd been too busy chasing growth targets to notice how alone I'd become. That night, in my apartment overlooking the river, I opened old files, emails, board minutes. I wasn't angry yet. I was hollow, and hollow things echo. Ernst's empire wasn't as clean as it looked. Favorable zoning approvals timed with donations, labor violations buried under subsidiaries. A fatal accident at a Hungarian depot quietly settled with a widow who never spoke German. I had signed many of those documents, trusted Ernst when he said it was handled. Spring arrived, pale and cautious. I stayed on as a consultant during the transition. Clara's new husband, Matthias, was younger, charming, utterly unqualified. Ernst paraded him through offices like a prince being shown his kingdom. Matthias asked me questions. I answered them honestly and recorded everything. At night, I walked the city, along the Rhine, past beer halls and street musicians, through neighborhoods rebuilt from rubble older than my parents' pain. Europe remembered its ruins. Families like the Havelmans simply painted over theirs. The annual shareholders' summit was scheduled for October in Frankfurt. Ernst wanted to announce the succession formally. Investors would be there, regulators, press, so would I. The morning of the summit, fog clung low to the main river. Inside the conference hall, glass and steel reflected confidence. Ernst took the stage to applause. "Legacy," he began, "is about continuity." He never finished the sentence. The screens behind him flickered, then changed. Documents, audio clips, timelines. My voice echoed through the hall. Calm, precise. Continuity requires truth. Gasps spread like fire. Ernst's face drained of color. Matthias froze. I stepped onto the stage, heart pounding but steady. "I built this company," I said. "Not alone, but honestly, and I will not let it be handed to someone as a reward for replacing me in my own life." Security moved, but too late. Journalists were already recording. Regulators took notes. Ernst collapsed into his chair. In that moment, he looked old. Very old. The aftermath was brutal. Investigations, resignations, frozen assets. Ernst was forced out. Matthias vanished. Clara sent me one message. "You didn't have to destroy everything." I typed back, "You taught me replacement was survival." Winter returned to Cologne, crisp and bright. I sold my shares, walked away wealthy but lighter. I visited my parents in Gdansk, stood with my father by the docks, watched cranes lift containers endlessly. On New Year's Eve, I stood alone on the Hohenzollern Bridge as fireworks bloomed over the Rhine. Couples kissed. Strangers laughed. The river kept moving. I raised a small paper cup of cheap wine. I had been replaced. But this time, I chose what came next.